The Marvels, the latest entry into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, has become the first of Marvel's output to not only lose the studio money, but lose a tremendous amount at, thus far, a whopping $500 million. As much grief as Ant-Man 3 was given over its $100 million opening, that's already looking to be more than what the Marvels will make in its entire domestic run. The studio that once put out banger after banger with their output has now reached a point where it has to recalculate its entire trajectory, which for a studio that plans its lineup years in advance is, no bueno. But where did this go wrong in the first place? The studio used to be trusted with consistent quality in its output and was often considered a surefire win for the House of Mouse, and now a tremendous amount of its audience has been split into less than half. Is it simply because of superhero fatigue? Have audiences simply grown tired of the genre altogether? That may be part of it, although the genre still arguably has the attention of audiences with hits like Matt Reeves' Batman, Spider-Man No Way Home, and next year's Deadpool 3 that everyone claims will make $1 billion. Perhaps the genre is not as solidified as a surefire win for studios as it once was, and they just need to be cautious of what superheroes they choose to bring to life as well as how they present them to audiences, but I'd say that's only part of the problem. Is it the backlash behind Brie Larson, as well as how she responded to the backlash? Well, she certainly didn't help, though if they had built up the other characters correctly, which we'll get to in a second, she could have had one, perhaps two co-stars that could have helped the film build past such backlash against her. Part of the problem, which I may cover in another video around the Great Mouse Defective in general, is that they completely overspent on the project, thinking that Marvel and superheroes and the Marvel Universe were all a surefire win no matter how much they spent, but at this box office, they would have had to spend roughly $80 million just to break even, and Deadpool barely got away with such a budget. No, the biggest slip-up the Marvels made is missing the one thing that made the MCU so successful in its grand run of the 31 films that preceded Quantumania, particularly in the 20 or so films from phases 1 through 3. Imagine for a second that, assuming this wasn't already the case for you, you had never seen any of the preceding MCU films before going into the Avengers. You saw the posters and trailers for this, thought it looked cool, and before you had a chance to get caught up, you went to see the film with a few of your friends with no prep work. What would you get? A film about superpowered characters with a variety of personalities, ones that, for the most part, are flamboyant enough to understand at least on a surface level, as I've discussed in other videos, being forced to work together to stop a bad guy from taking over the world with his alien army. Conflicts ensue, but they eventually learn to work together, resulting in some epic action scenes. And because you had such a good time with that film, now you have more of an interest to get caught up with the rest of the films to get a further understanding of these characters and their personalities. With the exception of maybe Avengers Endgame, which is probably more special to those familiar with the legacy than it is to any newcomers, every MCU film in phases 1 through 3 works like this. They're better when you have an understanding of what the characters have gone through up to that point, but they still work as individual films that anyone can watch at any point in the timeline. And they've managed to grow their audience this way because of their diverse cultures and unique personalities. Why do you think that, with the exception of Age of Ultron, the box office kept growing for each Avengers film? By the time the Avengers came out, the audience for the studio ranged from that of sci-fi, to that of horror, to that of fantasy, to that of historical, all coming together for this super-powered epic along with, again, some newcomers. By the time Infinity War came out, fans of African culture, heist movies, and high school comedies got thrown into the mix as well. And each of those films benefited from a FOMO effect that made the fans of the previous films feel like they had to watch every film up to that point. So they also benefited from a rally of followers along with newcomers as well. Every movie got treated as an on-ramp, even, like I said earlier, the Avengers films, which grew the Marvel fanbase with each sequential film. Ever since the beginning of Phase 4, though, there's been this assumption that if you're watching the MCU by this point, that you're pretty much caught up with everything, which is a fair assumption for phases 1 through 3. I mean, Avengers Endgame did make $3 billion at the worldwide box office, but then by the time the first swing of Disney Plus shows came and went, the same assumption was made with people going to see the new movies, having been caught up with all these Disney Plus shows, which Marvel had to find out the hard way was so wrong. We already got a taste of that with Doctor Strange 2 last year, when people who hadn't watched WandaVision, which turned out to be a lot more than Disney or Marvel were expecting, were lost on the motivations behind Wanda's insane actions, but because they were at least smart enough to keep those elements out of the advertising, the film still made almost $1 billion. With the Marvels, though, the required viewing was right there at face value, which, no shit, Sherlock, turned out to be a huge turnoff for mass audiences. Look at this poster, for instance. Even if they knew who Captain Marvel was from the first movie, most audiences most likely looked at this confused, asking, who the crap are these two? It's just an Indian girl and a black woman, neither of whom I recognize as either characters from previous movies or big celebrities or anything, and all they're doing is smiling and waving their arms. And the response is, oh, you gotta watch these two shows that total out to 15 hours of watch time to get it. Bzzz. wrong answer. In contrast, look at this poster for the Avengers. You got a man in a tech-driven suit, a patriotic hero, a muscular giant that most people recognize as the Hulk by this point, a Norse god, a buff guy that fires arrows, and a tough girl. Even without seeing any of the previous movies, chances are if you're a fan of the comic book genre, that should be at least a little bit appealing. This, beyond one character from a movie that everybody saw and two characters from shows that no one saw, is so bland and so non-descriptive that it basically has no appeal. And the trailers were even worse, as you got a little bit of an idea of the characters' personalities, but again, unless you've seen these two shows, the only characters you probably recognize are Captain Marvel and Nick Fury. And this random girl that Fury's with, where's Agent Hill? Oh, you gotta watch this show to get that too. Bzzz. Just go to visit this Indian family because their daughter is switching bodies with her and Captain Marvel. Okay, why? And how, for that matter? There's a bad girl, she hates Captain Marvel, and that's it. And these three are switching bodies again. Okay, cool action scenes, but why should I care? What are they fighting for? What's the villain trying to do, and why should they stop her? The film itself barely answers that question, let alone the shows, by the way. Again, with the Avengers, you at least got a sense that it was a straightforward action flick with a simple plot and fun characters. But with the Marvels, did anyone get a sense of what the plot was going to be or what was at stake? The advertising, let alone the film, either assumes that you've seen these shows and would be able to answer those questions for yourself because of that, or that you love the MCU so much that you'd be willing to check out all their extra material to get caught up with everything just so you can understand these characters and their chemistry. Which, first of all, just saying that out loud should make it occur to anybody that's a ton of legwork to be done for a 2-hour visit to the theater. But, as it turns out, even when you do get caught up with all that, and you do watch the damn film, it turns out you're still not caught up enough! Well, as the box office has proven, audiences no longer love the MCU that much, and the studio is going to need to put the legwork back in, something they shouldn't have faltered on putting in the first place, to win audiences back. If I were Marvel, I would make the next couple of films fresh, new experiences that could serve as on-ramps for new audiences. Make Captain America 4 so that you wouldn't have to burn through Falcon and the Winter Soldier just to follow it. Make Thunderbolts so that you wouldn't have to see that or Black Widow to understand these characters or their chemistry. Blade, Deadpool 3, and Fantastic Four should have those appeals just fine, being fresh new franchises for the universe, but if we had to watch over 100 hours of movies and TV shows just to be able to comprehend Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars, chances are those will be the franchise's biggest bombs as well, so best to remedy those along with that. Look, I don't want the MCU to die out, at least not without hitting a stronger note, but if Marvel Studios doesn't want the same thing, which I would safely assume they don't, they need to get better about reading their audiences. The homework portion of the MCU, the Easter eggs, the tie-ins, connecting the dots and all that, has been a fun side quest for diehard fans, and to an extent it still kinda is. But the minute you make it a requirement for all your mass audiences, and especially newcomers, it doesn't result in more viewership of your Disney Plus content, it results in less viewership of your theatrical releases as it starts to feel less like a fun time at the movies and more like school. And we get enough of that crap on a daily basis. What made the Marvel movies fun and accessible is that there were standalone movies and shows first and a connected universe second. And saying, oh, we don't have to establish these character motivations here because this show back there already did that, it's just as lazy as any other bad writing for any other bomb. We love the Infinity Saga. I've even enjoyed the majority of movies and shows we've gotten in the Multiverse Saga. But while some of us enjoy connecting the dots and making videos about them, others just want to see a damn movie or show. The homework portion should be a fun side quest, not a requirement for the comprehension of your film, because that instantly takes away the #1 aspect of consumer appeal, convenience. And maybe Marvel and Disney would know that if they stopped making us do homework and started doing some of their own.